Well, Stats Canada has just released the latest Canadian retail numbers, and retail sales decreased 0.4% to $70 billion in December. Sales were down in 3 of 9 subsectors, led by decreases in motor vehicle and parts. For reaction and more in-depth analysis, we turn to Veronica Clark, U.S. and Canadian economist at Citi Research. Veronica, thanks very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Month over month, 0.4, survey was 0.5, and excluding autos, it was down 0.1 and up actually without the autos. Your thoughts on those initial numbers?
Yeah, it seems about in line with expectations. Stats Canada always releases this preliminary read, so we have a rough idea of what these retail sales numbers will look like. There were some very slight downward revisions to stronger sales in November. I'd say overall, not anything too surprising. This is a picture of consumption that is resilient enough, but does seem to have slowed as we get into the end of the year. And
when you say resilient, how resilient would you put that? It's not overly a huge endorsement.
No. I think if anything, we've been expecting consumers to cut back on spending maybe even earlier this year, and we didn't quite see that. Of course, there's a lot of uncertainty. Unemployment is relatively elevated. Population growth has slowed a lot, and I think in the first couple months, first half of the year, even the Bank of Canada was, I think, a bit surprised at how resilient consumption had looked. But it does finally look to have slowed in the second half of the year. It looks probably like we'll be running goods spending in Q4 GDP that's about flat to maybe slightly contractionary.
How is the car sales in Canada doing, and are we seeing bigger demand for, I guess, combustible vehicles versus EVs, or is there a breakdown there?
Yeah, this number doesn't really have that kind of breakdown as far as I'm aware of. If anything, car sales are somewhat like total consumption. It's resilient enough, but pulling back. We've definitely seen production pulling back, so just that limited supply would even constrain sales. I'm not entirely sure of that kind of consumption breakdown though.
And with the retail sales, we saw the decrease from November. Canadian Tire just had their earnings. They said they had better than expected holiday season. Usually, I would think that's December. Should we be worried that there was a dip? Is this a trend that we're looking at, or just more of a balancing?
Yeah, I would say if anything, this monthly retail sales data this year has just gotten a lot more volatile than we're used to seeing. It really started maybe a year ago when we had that sales tax holiday, shifting monthly patterns. And yeah, it's really, I think, important just to not read too much into any one month, especially around the holidays. These numbers are seasonally adjusted for usual holiday spending patterns. Stats Canada's preliminary estimate for January looks like there's going to be a rebound in retail sales in January. So yeah, it's you don't want to read too much into any one month of data.
And I know you're getting the numbers as we're getting them. Provincially, any areas that were hit harder by the looks of it than others?
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look yet, unfortunately. So yeah, we'll see that breakdown. I mean, if anything, certain regions have been more resilient than others. We have obviously seen more slowing in the more trade dependent parts of the economy. But yeah, haven't seen that breakdown yet, unfortunately.
Given the uncertainty of the tariffs, the upcoming USMCA, I think obviously the strength in retail sales in Canada has probably been much better than people expected. I think the expectation probably coming into 2026 or 2025 was probably pretty horrible. How is 2026 looking, and how is it shaping up? I know we've had some tough weather to start the year. What's the outlook for this year?
Yeah. I mean, that preliminary estimate for January retail sales does look pretty healthy. So I don't know if there's a whole lot of weather impact in there. Maybe we saw that in some of the home sales data we had earlier this week. I would say, though, we have started to see more of this slowing in consumption in the second half of 2025. And there are, unfortunately, I think a lot of headwinds still for 2026, even just from something like slowing immigration, slowing population growth. That would mean softer aggregate spending. It's just fewer people in the economy spending. Unemployment is still elevated. It was interesting a couple weeks ago at the Bank of Canada rate decision. There was also this mention of maybe people refinancing mortgages are actually going to be seeing a higher rate this year. That could be maybe a headwind to consumption. So I would be cautious still on how much that resilience lasts.
And I'm just kind of getting a little further down. Overall, for 2025, retail sales were up 4% compared to 2024. 8 of the 9 subsectors were increases. What does that show? What does that tell you heading into 2026 then?
Yeah, it's that resilient, surprisingly resilient spending that we saw in the first part of the year. We do have to remember that we started 2025 with that sales tax holiday, so that could have meant, levels of spending were a bit higher to start the year, and we won't be getting that kind of boost, going forward. There are maybe still some fiscal support that we could get towards the middle of the year, but yeah, if anything, that surprising resilience in the first half of the year seems to maybe be fading into the second half.
And so not really a good picture being painted for 2026.
Yeah, and it depends a lot on, the evolution of the labor market. If there is, any kind of recovery in demand there. It doesn't seem like that recovery in hiring is happening based on, survey indications. Fortunately, there's not the signs of large, widespread layoffs yet, but you would be worried that in a very low hiring environment, that could still be the next step. So yeah, I am still cautious on all the headwinds that there is still for the consumer this year.
Okay, Veronica, we'll wrap it up there, but thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Veronica Clark is U.S. and Canadian economist at Citi Research.